In today's video, I'm showing you how I built my wooden market display. This shelving unit can be used to display tons of different products like art prints, notepads, and greeting cards. Now before I built this display, I was using a display I made from thick poster board. I even attached marbles to the back to add some weight to it to prevent it from flying away in the wind. It has held up great through my first couple of markets, but since I knew I wanted to continue doing markets long term, I thought it was worth it to invest in something more durable and longer lasting. Now I'm including a rough diagram of the display I'm building today with measurements included so there's a reference to help make sense of everything. Here is a quick look at the materials I'm using, which will also be posted in the description below. So first is a 24 by 36 inch project board, 3 3/4 inch square dowels as the shelf bases, 3 1.5 inch craft boards as the shelf faces, 2 2.5 inch craft boards as the side panels, 1 3.5 by 36 inch craft board as the legs or the supports, 18 gauge 1.5 inch brad nails, 18 gauge 1 inch brad nails, 2 3-inch hinges, and several sanding blocks including an 80 grit, 180 grit, and the 220. I'm also using a mechanical pencil, work gloves, Gorilla wood glue, a microfiber cloth, a 12-inch miter box with a handsaw, as well as a 36-inch T-square, a Ryobi brad nailer or a hammer and nails would work fine, spar urethane oil-based exterior in clear satin, and a 2-inch stain brush. Now my first step is to know that my main board for the display is 36 inches wide by 24 inches tall, and each of my cards when bagged measure 5 by 7. So I have divided the length of my board into 3 sections, each being 8 inches tall. This way I'll have a little bit of room above each card, so I'll always have the option to display taller items like prints, notepads, or notebooks. I'm going to make lines at the 8 and 16 inch marks, and that way I know where I will be placing my square dowels. After I've measured both sides of the board and ensuring those marks line up, I'm going to give my project board a quick sanding before I attach the shelves. So I'm using the 8-inch and 16-inch markings as guides. It's now time to take each of the 3/4 inch square wooden dowels and glue them to their respective spots. So one dowel will be placed at the very bottom, another at the 8-inch mark, and the third at the 16-inch mark. I'm also making sure to check my measurements several times before gluing or sawing anything, just to ensure that everything lines up well. And thankfully any excess glue can be wiped off pretty easily with a damp cloth. So I'm just going to continue by gluing the next square dowel at the 8-inch mark and the final one at the 16-inch mark. Now once the glue on each of these dowels have dried for a couple hours, I'm going to take the brad nailer and using the 1-inch nails to secure the shelves in place. I think this part can also be done using a hammer, nails, and some precision. Once the nails are in each of the square dowels, I'm going to take the 1.5 inch craft boards and glue those to the front of the square dowels, creating a vertical edge for the shelves. This way, any product I place on the shelves has something there to prevent it from falling forward. Now that those are all glued, I'm going to leave them to dry overnight. The next day, I'm taking both of the 2.5 inch boards that I'll be using for the side panels. These boards are 36 inches long, and since my display is only 24 inches tall, I'm going to cut them down to 24 inches as well. So using my T-square, I'm measuring out 24 inches on both boards, ensuring the measurements line up on both sides. Now using my miter box and handsaw, I'm going to get to work cutting these pieces down from 36 inches to 24 inches. I'm taking the time to check my measurements one more time before grabbing the saw. And once I'm finished cutting, I'm now left with 2 24-inch pieces and 2 12-inch scrap pieces. I'm going to set these scrap pieces aside to use a little later on in the project. I'm now taking the wood glue and one side at a time I'm attaching the 24-inch panels to the side of the display, creating walls that will frame the side of the display nicely. I attached each of these panels on separate days to ensure the glue was cured properly, weighing them down with whatever I had available. The following day, I'm going to grab the 1.5 inch brad nails and pop those in to ensure these side panels aren't going anywhere. Now for the legs of the display, I decided to make a prototype to see what length would work best, and I found that 18-inch legs are perfect. So I'm using the 3.5 by 36 inch board, and I can simply cut it in half using the miter box and handsaw to make 2 equal 18-inch legs or supports. Now, in order to prevent the screws on the hinges from going through the back of the board and poking through the front of the display, I need to make both my main project board and the leg pieces a little thicker by making use of the leftover 12-inch scrap boards we cut earlier. From these, I'm going to cut them down to 4 4-inch sections that I can use to add to the width of the legs and the back of the main board. So I'm going to start by measuring out 4-inch sections across both scrap pieces, cutting out 4 of them, and finally preparing to attach them to the supports. I'm now gluing a 4-inch piece to one end of each leg, making sure to let that dry for several hours before moving on. Once those are dry, I'll then take the leg and measure 18 inches up from the bottom of the display to find exactly where I'll be attaching the other 4-inch pieces. Once I'm sure they are both measuring 18 inches from the bottom and about 12 inches apart, I'm going to glue these 4-inch blocks down. Once these 4 blocks have dried, I'm going to grab my pencil and mark where the screws for the hinges need to be drilled. I'll drill pilot holes so the screws go in a bit easier, and then I'm ready to attach the hinges to both the back of the board and the legs, one screw at a time. I'll then repeat these same steps on the other side, and just like that, we have 2 beautiful hinged legs or supports. Now that both legs are fully functioning, it is finally time to seal the entire display to protect it from wear and tear and to add some warmth into it. Before I can dive in with the spar urethane, I am going to need to give the entire display a thorough sanding. I'm going to use my pencil and lightly draw a huge squiggly line across each level, then going in with the lowest grit sanding block I have, the 80 grit. This way I can ensure that I am sanding thoroughly enough as I can see the pencil marks disappear. I'm repeating these steps after I remove the dust with the microfiber cloth, and then drawing my squiggly pencil technique, and then finally moving up to a finer sanding block, the 180 grit. Once I've removed as much dust as I can, I am ready to apply the first coat of spar urethane. I'm using this in clear satin and giving that a good stir before I dip the brush in. I chose to use an exterior grade sealer since most markets I do are outside, where my display will often be exposed to humidity, rain, and lots of sunlight, so I wanted something that can withstand those conditions. Now I'm doing my best to make an even first coat by using long, even brush strokes, as I am just trying to cover the whole display in a nice thin layer of the spar urethane. Now somehow I lost this clip, but I lightly sanded the display with the finest 220 grit sanding block after letting it dry for a few days. I then wiped off any dust and then applied a thin final second layer. After allowing that to dry for a few more days, I was able to put my new display to use. I am so happy with how my display turned out. It took a bit of planning, and the materials and time spent on it were definitely an investment, but I think all of that has been so worth it. I've been able to take it out to a market where there were some pretty strong winds, and I am so happy to say that it did not budge once. It also got some dirt on it, but I was able to easily wipe it off, so it's nice to say that I achieved my goal of making a durable, sleek display that travels well to and from markets. I also love that I have the option to display slightly taller products on here like notepads or art prints, making it more versatile as I build upon my product line. At the end of the day, I am just a girl who wanted a durable market display stand, and I went out and built one. It is not perfect, but it's doing exactly what I needed it to, and I could not be happier with how it came out. I hope this video has been helpful if you are also in the market to build a display for your own markets or events. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!